how do you get the price down without compromising quality? And it's about negotiating, but also asking questions. So if you ask, let's say you ask for a price reduction of 10% and they say, no, we can't do it. And you're okay, so why is that? Can you share with me your challenges? What are your challenges around reducing the cost by 10%? And then you'll learn a lot from that. It could be that your product, one step is extremely labor intensive. So it involves their workers having to spend more time on average than most other orders, and that's bloating the cost. So by understanding and asking good questions as negotiators, you can step into their shoes a little bit and then start troubleshooting.
Welcome to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen and I am your host. And today we've got a very special guest, J.K. Beaton, who's a co-founder of China Product Pros, who specializes in product sourcing with a focus on transparency and efficiency, leveraging the insights from his successful 7-figure Amazon home storage brand. Him, his wife, and their international team guide clients to improving quality, reducing costs, and strategic factory relationships using his deep understanding of the journey from manufacturing to market. Welcome to the podcast, JK.
Great. Thanks, Arlen. I'm always not sure what to do during the intro. It's like when people sing happy birthday to you and you're like, okay, I'm not sure what to do. I'll just kind of sit here. But great intro. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. We're actually interesting that you mentioned that. Sorry about that. Interesting that you mentioned that we're going to be in the process of kind of switching formats, actually.
Oh, okay.
For some episodes. So that actually will be the intro. I'm actually moving forward soon. It'll be recorded separately.
Nice.
My business partner actually is going to be joining me on some of the recordings coming up. And so we're excited about that. And so that'll be a little bit different.
Nice.
But definitely excited to talk to you. You know, today we're going to be diving deep into, basically your bread and butter, which is product sourcing from the red flags that you see, because could be kind of somewhat of a wild west these days with our whole global economy and our whole global supply chain. So we're only talking about the product sourcing, the cost of goods sold, and how do you get your brand the best possible pricing and finding those best possible, vendors. And so we're going to be kind of diving in deep into that. And then, so how do you avoid any of the pitfalls that kind of come along with product sourcing? So super excited to dig deep into that. But before we do get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and specifically how you got into what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to. So I started China Product Pros with my wife 3 years ago. We're a full suite agency. But prior to that, the whole backstory is that I started sourcing as a university student when I was in China. So I was in China, going to university, majoring in Chinese language and culture. And I was on Alibaba helping a few buddies back home find products. And so that was the start of it all, Arlen. And then through time, as I came back to Canada in 2010, after spending close to 5 years in China, I've been working with China ever since. So I've worked with a clothing company, with a major university here, in various kinds of relationships with different Chinese business partners, including in manufacturing. So my wife and I, we launched our own brand in 2016 in the home storage space. And then fast forward to COVID, when things really took off for our brand, we ended up hiring someone on the ground in China to represent our company's best interests with factories in China. And it went really, really well. And kind of like what happened in 2007 with friends asking for help when I was on the ground, I had friends in the space asking for assistance with their suppliers because they knew we had boots on the ground in China. So like the way many companies start, I think it was with that organic need, uh, and tapping into what we've always considered to be our superpower. So my wife, her background is in international trade and logistics. And then through all the work and my language skills, as well as speaking Chinese, we built and grew our team on the ground. Now in total, we're a team of around, I think, 11 or 12. We just made 2 recent hires, but we've been having a lot of fun through the agency, helping brands save money, find better products, get them quicker to market, and also shine a lot of transparency into the process, so they know exactly how much they're paying, who they're working with, and they have an itemized list of their costs, so they know where they can try to save money.
Okay, great, great. Yeah, that's some good stuff, and it helps. I know, of course, you being familiar with China, the whole business ecosystem, if you will, the whole supply chain system, you having lived there and also being familiar with a lot of the cultural norms, I know
Yeah.
is a big thing. That's what I keep hearing when you're dealing with, business people over there. There's certain ways that they are accustomed to doing business, and things are a little bit different here in the US. And so if you're not really that familiar with a lot of those standard cultural norms that they have, then you could rub people the wrong way, and that's the last thing that you want to do. So it's good to know that you have a kind of a foothold on how to go about things properly. So I think where I want to start is if you could share what some of the common red flags are to look out for when you're dealing with sourcing products from China, and how do you navigate some of these things?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether you're a mature brand who's been working with a supplier for years, or if you're starting out afresh, I think this next one applies to both scenarios. And it is to find out for sure who you're working with. Are you working with a trade company, or are you working direct with a factory? The biggest difference between the two is that a trade company is a middleman. They're normally working out of an office in a major city in China, and then they have a Rolodex of factories that they then give your order to. So as you can imagine, in this scenario, they're increasing the price to cover their costs, and that can be anywhere from 10% on the low end, but usually 20 up to 40%. So it greatly, greatly bloats your costs, but that's only one reason I'm not fond of working with trade companies. The second being, they often result in inconsistent quality, because instead of working with the same factory each time, Arlen, you'll often find yourself in a situation where you may work with a factory, say for your first order, you get excellent quality, your product is to specification, but then on your second order, suddenly you're seeing a difference in quality. The product packaging is somehow different, and you're left scratching your head wondering what's going on. And what probably happened if you're working with a trade company is that, unbeknownst to you, they took your purchase order that you put in, they put it out for requests for quotes in their network of factories. They got a better quote than they did with that
Oh
first
yeah,
factory, right? And now
gotcha,
suddenly
gotcha.
you're not even working with the same factory. So they have to relay all the information to the second factory. It may
I
not be
see.
their area of strength like it was for the first one. So those are kind of the two biggest reasons you want to be careful about working with trade companies. But certainly, I think um, trying to find a direct factory is a way to go. And more, they have all the advantages of a trade company. They big, strong factories in China now normally have someone on staff that speaks great English as well. So long gone are the days, not in every case, but in many cases, where you have to go with a trade company.
Hmm. Okay, great. Yeah, good to know. When you mentioned the fact that the in that if worst case scenario when you kind of agree on certain type of
Yeah.
packaging, and then when you put the order through, it's totally
Yeah.
different. It almost seems almost like a kind of a bait and switch, so to speak.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess in the eyes of the trade
Yeah.
company, it's not necessarily the case. It's a kind of an unintentional bait and switch, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
They're just really trying to get the best pricing, and if things have changed prior to you,
Right.
getting everything finalized and shipped out, then they're going to go with that other
Well,
supplier, and it just so happens it could be a little bit different.
that's exactly it. I think many times they're not looking to get you worse quality. Certainly not. They want you as a long-term
Right.
client, but there's so
Right.
many layers of communication when you're dealing with a trade company that things fall through the cracks. So if you're talking to your
Right.
trade company rep, they're then relaying that information to the rep at the actual factory, who's then relaying it to the production manager, who is then relaying it to the workers who are actually working on your order. So you see, like every time you add an additional layer of communication in there, there's another chance something can go wrong. And so once you change a factory, that starts happening again. And it's just anyone that's worked directly with a factory, and even better yet, has visited their factory, can attest that that relationship is so important, because not only are you getting a good price, good quality, but you're building on that with every single order.
Mhm.
You're improving those different aspects.
Right. Very true. Very true. Speaking of cost of goods, that's kind of one of the main things people are concerned about, especially when we're dealing with China. Thinking of, let's say, a business that is elsewhere, let's say in the US. And of course, let's say they were manufacturing and getting things done in the US. A lot of people may start there, but then shift to China as they start to grow, as they know they need to lower their they need to increase their margins,
Hmm.
and they need to, be able to push it out to a lot more people. What would you say are some effective strategies for lowering the cost of goods sold without compromising on the quality? We kind of talked about quality. Is there a best practice to be able to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would share is to talk to your factories more, and don't be afraid to rock the boat. So I think in growing up in Western culture, certainly as a boy growing up in Canada, I never saw my parents at, let's say, a market haggling over the cost of tomatoes. I don't know if you have as well, Arlen, but that's
No.
that's the case, and that's the culture in China, as it is in many countries in the
Right.
world. And
Right.
it's also
Right.
embedded, of course, in business to business transactions. So it's expected that you negotiate. I talk with a lot of brands that tell me, "Oh, things are good. I don't want to upset anyone." And I can tell you right now, you're not going to upset anyone unless you try to squeeze them for everything they're worth. And so what does that mean? This means that on every PO, assuming your POs are staying the same in size, if not growing, you should be negotiating for a better hand. So that could be in cost of product, trying to bring down the cost. It could be in packaging, trying to decrease the cost in the kind of your component and accessory costs. It could be looking at improving your payment terms. So let's say you pay 30% down and you pay 70% balance on shipping. You could try to negotiate that to 20/80 as a next step, for example. Um, it could be speed and prioritization of your order. Assuming a factory is a good factory, should have many orders in the queue. And if you are running out of stock and you have a strong relationship and you try to negotiate in, hey, could you do me a favor and bump my order up in the queue so that I can get it in 30 days instead of 45 days, that has a huge effect. Because if you're going out of stock, the difference between 15 days can be massive, right? Depending on the product you're selling. Um,
Right.
but yeah, coming back to don't rock the boat. So negotiate with your factories. I would try to be in the process, depending on your order volume, anywhere from talking to them every 2 weeks to every month. Just check in. If you have an order that's ongoing, pop in. The best way to contact them is via WeChat. You'll get the fastest
Okay.
responses. You'll get more videos, more photos than if you try to go through email. And ask them if you have an order and say, how's it going? Can you send me some pictures and some videos of where it's at in production? Are any challenges
Mm.
coming up? When it comes to quality, Arlen, so you mentioned something that's important. How do you get the price down without compromising quality? And it's about negotiating, but also asking questions. So if you ask, let's say you ask for a price reduction of 10%, and they say, no, we can't do it. And you're like, okay. So why is that? Can you share with me your challenges? What are your challenges around reducing the cost by 10%? Um, and then you'll learn a lot from that. It could be that your product, one step is extremely labor intensive. So it involves their workers having to spend more time on average than most other orders, and that's bloating the
Okay.
cost. It could be that
I
you have a
see.
certain component, if not the majority of the material, that the cost of raw materials has risen considerably in the last year. So by understanding and asking good questions as negotiators, you can step into their shoes a little bit and then start troubleshooting. So if you know
Mhm.
that your product's very labor intensive, maybe you could modify it somehow to make it less labor intensive, and then it's a win-win. You get to save your 10%, the factory gets to cut off X amount of hours on the production line making your product. So it's really about that back and forth and negotiating, asking good questions. If you run up against a
Mhm.
wall, asking why, asking how you can make it happen, um, to try to get to the point where you want to go.
Yeah, that's good to know because it may not always be the case that the supplier is trying to increase their profit margins and they're just, they're not really concerned about what you're trying to do, your needs, and you trying to get
Yep,
the best margin there. There could be other factors there, is kind of what you're
yep,
saying, where like you said, having to do with the assembly or how you're kind of in place with some of their other products that they're putting out. And so yeah, asking those questions can definitely help you uncover that. I see that, rather than just immediately getting on the defensive
right,
and thinking that they're just
yeah,
trying to get over on you. It may not necessarily be the case.
sure,
So that's good to know. Now, one of the terms that I've heard of and I saw in the notes that was provided before the episode is the term ransom at port.
mm,
um, if you can explain really what that is, and how could a brand avoid their products being ransomed at port?
sure. I think this will pique interest if you're listening to this. You're like, oh no. Uh, so what this refers to is a situation where you are selling a branded product in China, you're exporting it, importing it into your own country or wherever, and somebody in China catches wind that your product is successful and they beat you to trademarking it. And then they can
Mm.
go through the export process and stop it by saying, so if you're trying to
Oh wow.
export goods, they can say, no, no, I have the trademark right here. These are my
Mm.
goods. Meanwhile, they're sending you an email saying, listen, if you don't pay up, if you don't pay for this trademark, we are not going to release your goods.
Oh
So
wow.
the way to prevent this is by filing a trademark in China. It's
Mm.
relatively inexpensive. Most um, firms will charge you anywhere from 500 to 1,000 US dollars for the full application, and it will let you sleep so much better at night knowing that that situation could never happen to you. Because unlike
Mm.
the US is a first use system. So if I have a brand name in the US and I'm using it first and I can show proof of that even before I file, I should have a relatively good chance to uphold that trademark if it goes to court.
I see.
Whereas in China,
Okay.
it's a first to file. So even if you've
Mm.
used it far longer than whoever files it and tries to hold your goods ransom, because of the difference in laws, the system's different, and they're able to do that
Mm.
with more
Wow.
ease.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really good to know. I wasn't aware of that. that you would have to go through that whole separate process of trademarking in China to prevent
Yeah,
against something like that.
yeah.
How common is this the whole ransom at port issue? Are there companies out there in China that are just kind of bird dogging, so to speak, looking out for opportunities like this and swooping in there, registering trademarks?
Unfortunately, yes, there are. I wouldn't
Okay,
say
wow.
it's overly common. I've
Okay,
heard of it happening a few times. There
okay,
are, on both sides, there's firms in China that deal specifically for fighting for sellers that this happens to. And on the other
okay.
side, there's the term bird dogging is a new one for me. I like it. There's other not so great players that are looking for like opportunities to grab trademarks that they can, and it could be anyone in the process. It has happened if you're working with an unscrupulous factory that maybe they get a cousin to go and trademark it for them. But I would
Okay,
say it doesn't happen all that often. But for the
okay,
cost of filing that trademark and the peace of mind, I think it's absolutely worth doing.
okay. Yeah, that's good to know. With this whole product sourcing, we've talked a lot about the issues that could arise with, the quality of packaging from negotiating the deal to it actually being shipped, the variance of that. And so I know there's a lot of other factors, not only with the packaging, but the actual quality of the product
Right.
itself. How do you actually, institute any type of quality control with product sourcing and to make sure that it is the way that you want it to be at the time of shipment and throughout the entire supply chain process?
Absolutely. So much like in, I think so. Sorry, let me rewind for a second here. Um, I think you need to be very proactive in your sampling
Okay.
stage. Uh, go slow in sampling. There's parts of the process where you can run, but during sampling, you want to walk. And as you
Okay.
sample, you should get to the point, and if you need to go through multiple iterations as you update the sample, do so until you have a sample you're very confident in. That's called a pre-production sample that should mimic what the actual production product would look like. And then you move forward with production. During production, make sure you have check-in points. Don't just assume you put in your purchase order and then you pick up the order at the end that everything will be to specification. Things come up, challenges come up. So for a lot of our clients, we're in the factory. So we'll pop into the factory, make sure things are going as they should. We're asking questions. Depending on the order type and complexity, we're often talking to the factory every single week to make sure
Mm.
that things are going as planned. The other thing that can happen overall in manufacturing, it's not unique to China, but it certainly happens in China, is the factory making assumptions. So they're super busy. They probably have dozens, if not hundreds, of different orders going on at the same time. And let's say you put in an order, Arlen, for these coasters, and you have a certain Pantone color that you want it to be, and they get to that production point where they need to use that color, and then someone on the floor might be like, ah, geez, we don't have that. I don't think they'll mind if we update it to the slightly different
Right.
color. um,
Right.
but chances are you might very well mind, because if it's off brand,
Hmm.
then it makes a huge difference trying to market and sell that product down the line. So again, that comes back to good communication, talking to your factory enough. Don't just put in a purchase order and then wait until the end and discover issues. You can prevent those issues by having more frequent conversations with your factories.
Okay. And you mentioned a few things for what you guys do because, like you said, a lot of times you're on site. You're
Mhm.
actually at the factory. You're putting hands on the
Yeah.
product. You're expecting everything. How important is it for a brand to be able to either go on site, have someone go on site and kind of step through the process, inspect the products, or these days can they really get away with doing everything remotely?
I think it's difficult to do everything remotely unless you
Okay.
have an established relationship that's been ongoing for many years. Even then, it carries its risk because changes happen at the factory. Management
Right.
changes, production floor changes, material, what have you. Um, so at the very least, if you don't have boots on the ground, if you don't have representation through an agency, definitely get a pre-shipment inspection done before you
Okay.
pay the balance owing on your goods. Get a third party to come in. It's a service we offer. Of course, many other companies do as well. But get someone to come in, do a full inspection, give you a report of the quality of your product. They'll take pictures, videos, and outline everything. And then if there's issues, you have leverage because you haven't paid that amount owing. So you go back to the factory, talk with them, try to resolve issues. And then once issues are resolved, only then do you pay the balance owing and allow the product to ship. So that's again very at the very least. But if you're spending tens of thousands of dollars on a mold, on a product, I think for the investment of hiring an agent, whether it's us or someone else, you typically get a very high ROI on that. Um,
Okay.
and it just allows you to refocus your efforts elsewhere. So if you're listening to this and you think manufacturing is not your strong point, but let's say marketing is, or a different aspect of the business, that can often be a good strategic decision to outsource that and have a strong partner come on and help you take care of that while you refocus your attention to higher ROI items for you.
Okay. That's really good to know, because I think a lot of times a brand may think that, may not be new to this. They may think because now, we're kind of we have a global economy, relations are pretty
Mm.
good with China. And, um, you know, there's so much that can be done through video, through chat, all these types of things. I guess there still is nothing at this point that can really replace somebody being boots on the ground and physically being there through various stages of the
I'd say so. Like, if you
okay.
want to run the best test is if you've never visited your factory, go and visit your factory and then compare your relationship pre-visit and post-visit. I absolutely
Okay.
guarantee you you'll have a stronger relationship, better communication, probably better quality, if not better pricing and terms post-visit. So I think still to this day, Arlen, nothing beats meeting someone in person, shaking their hand, breaking bread
Right.
together. And it's no different when doing business with the Chinese.
Okay. That's good to know. Well, JK, as we get ready to wrap things up,
Mhm.
if we're looking towards the future, I wanted to see how would you see, or how do you see this whole landscape of product sourcing from China evolving? And are there any emerging trends that you've seen that brands should be aware of in order to kind of stay ahead of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the ground in China, we've seen a huge evolution of factories. As labor costs grow, they want to keep costs down to attract brands. And so they're moving toward automation. We're seeing a lot of factory owners buying machines, automating many components of of the production process. And that's a great thing as brands. It means costs will stay low. Production times should speed up. Quality should be higher because you'll have a higher degree of consistency usually if it's through an automated process versus a manual one. So that's one. I think as shippers, or sorry, my brain was getting ahead of itself, as brands, also shipping is a big component. So be mindful of the timing of when you're sending your shipments out. Great example I often use is Chinese New Year. Anyone that's manufactured in China knows the country closes down for pretty much a full month.
Okay.
If you're
Wow.
shipping like leading up to Chinese New Year and you get too close, let's say within 2 weeks, if not even a month prior to
Mhm.
Chinese New Year, chances are your freight costs to get your goods on a ship out of China are going to be much, much higher than if you had planned to ship, let's say in December instead of late January.
I see.
So
Mhm.
one tip I'll leave the audience with, if you're on something like Google Calendar, you can go to add a calendar. You can find the one called Chinese holidays, add that as kind of a layover on top of your calendar. and you'll be able to see when those holidays are coming up. And they're not static. Every year they change based on the lunar calendar. So it's not like Christmas, we know when that is every year, but in China, they shift by normally a couple of weeks, if not a few weeks.
Right. Interesting. That's good to know. I mean, that's a great tip. I know some other countries are the same type of thing. I know in India, some of their holidays coincide with like you said, the lunar calendar or the sighting of the full moon.
Yeah.
And so it adjusts. And so, it's good to know that, you want to definitely see how you can avoid those shutdowns, because I can see that being very problematic if you're trying to get stuff shipped out.
For sure.
Well, JK, this has been an awesome conversation. I think it's very enlightening, especially for e-commerce brands that are looking to do product sourcing through China, or if they're currently doing it, or they're looking at best practices. And so I think this was a lot of definitely practical and useful information. But I always like to switch gears here before we let you go. If you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact about yourself that you think we'd be interested to know.
Sure. Let's see. I don't know why this came to mind. The first concert I ever went to was the Backstreet Boys.
Okay. Gotcha.
It's one of those, team building things that always came up, the two truths and a lie. I always kind of slipped that in there.
Okay.
Maybe not
Gotcha.
the most interesting, but the first thing that came to mind.
Okay, first concert, Backstreet Boys. Okay, awesome. Were you a fan back in the day?
No, I was part of a camp with a bunch of other preteens, and they just took us to the Backstreet Boys. It was fun though. I had a good time. It was a cool experience.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Well, good stuff. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think the Backstreet Boys, I guess at this point, I've seen different blurbs where they, all of these bands from the past, they always are doing these reunion tours and things. Yeah, it's interesting. The whole music industry is interesting to me these days, just because it's so different. None of these groups are making money from the physical sale of their music, because with streaming, you're making less than a penny on that, and so they're really kind of forced to do these shows in order to make a living. And so that's why you kind of see all of these bands. You see a resurgence or a reunion tour, and they're some of them still do pretty good because they have some diehard fans that are going to be with
nostalgia
them.
is a powerful thing, isn't it? Like you have a lot of folks from that era that love to see bands they liked during their teenage years.
Exactly. Brings up a lot of memories from people's childhood, and so it's not all bad the way the record industry is, but it keeps them going, I guess you could say. Well, thank you for sharing that, JK. I appreciate that. Lastly, before we do let you go, if you don't mind sharing the best way for our listeners and viewers to get a hold of you if they want to pick your brain any more about product sourcing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach out direct by email at jk@chinaproductpros.com, or I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn under John Kyle Beaton, my full name.
Okay, gotcha. Sounds good. Well, we'll have the link to your website in the show notes so people can get a hold of you there. And we definitely appreciate you coming on and doing the e-commerce marketing podcast with us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Arlen. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the e-commerce marketing podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level, but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.